Welcome to the World Language Standards Update webinar number 4, our last broadcast for this year where we are in installation. The focus of today's broadcast is Onward to initial implementation, which will officially happen in the 25-26 school year. My name is Anne-Marie Gunter. You see that I am your World Languages consultant there on the screen and my contact information. I am also joined on the World Languages team by my supervisor, Dr. Stacy Daniel. She's the section chief for ELA and Languages. She is currently out on maternity leave, so I am the acting section chief for English Language Arts and Languages, which includes World Languages and Multilingual Learners, or Title III ESL consultants. So that's who's behind the scenes today. I will say as well that as part of my work, I am flying solo this afternoon. So it may take me a moment as I respond to things in chat and so forth. Please give me a little grace on that. I will get to all the questions and so forth as we go on. Here is today's agenda. We're going to start with a welcome in general and some introductions. Then we're going to talk about the instructional support resources. Obviously, if we're moving on to initial implementation in classrooms, we've got to look at the support tools that are for our new standards. Those that are available now in our World Languages Resources Hub, which we're going to take a close look at together and do some activities with. And then those that are coming in the summer of 2025, so that will be released before we do initial implementation. After that, we'll spend a little bit of time on the upcoming PD or professional development that's going to be available for World Languages. And then we'll do a wrap up at the end. I'm taking a check. Looks like everyone is good to go. And we're doing some troubleshooting in the chat. Thank you for that. Let's begin with our welcome and introductions. To start out with, although some of you shared this already, we'd like to know, where is your district, charter school, or organization located in North Carolina? And this is actually a poll question. So I'm going to go ahead and open the poll question here in a moment for that, but take a look at the map and where you are located. All right, let's go ahead and respond. Where is your district, charter school, or organization located in North Carolina? The poll question should be present right now on the side of your display, kind of depending on which there we go. Depending on which server you're using and platform to access this, but you can see, just click on your answer, whether it's one of the 8 regions located throughout the state, or you serve multiple regions, or just in case, I also put outside of North Carolina in case we have any visitors or neighbors joining us today. Take a look. We've got a little bit of time left for you to get your answer in. All right, be sure you give your answer. Important to see who's here. Looks like we're getting a pretty good sweep of the state. And I see some people also adding it in the chat. Please add it on the poll question if you can, but if you can't, don't worry about it. All right, I'm going to close our poll. And then I'm going to share the poll results. Those should be visible to you now. It looks like we have somebody from all 8 of our regions here today in the broadcast. So welcome everyone from across the state. Certainly there are more in some regions. And I also see people adding their information in the chat. Please hold on that just a moment, as we're going to get to that in another question. All right. Thank you for that. Also, we'd like to know, Since this is our last broadcast of our Standards Update webinar series, what have you done to learn about the new standards? And this is a check all that apply for you. So have you downloaded and reviewed one or more of the standards documents? Have you participated in previous webinars of this series? Have you attended one of the regional trainings? Have you completed and or led local sessions about the new standards? Have you registered for the NCDPI Summer Conference? Have you read one or more of the listserv newsletters or social media postings, or something else? Take a moment to think about what your answer would be. I'm going to go ahead and get this ready. All right, I'm going to open the poll, and once again, this is a check all that applies, so you can click on the answers that apply to you specifically in the display on your dashboard there as you're logged in. Go ahead and click the ones that apply to you. All right, take a moment to answer that. Got about 15 seconds left, so there's plenty of time to get your response in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share those poll results with you. It looks like a good chunk of you have in fact downloaded and reviewed one or more of the standards documents, which is great. It's always good to take a look at those when you have some time to really read through them. We also have a number of people who have participated in the previous webinars in this series. That's great to hear. As well as those who attended some of the regional trainings or completed and or led local sessions. In addition, we have people who have read one or more of the listserv newsletters or other social media postings about the new standards. And the good news is, by coming today to the webinar, you get your email address added to those listservs so that you'll get those announcements in the future if you haven't already. We also have some folks who've registered for the NCDPI Summer Conference. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in some of the world language sessions that will be there. And we've got a few that say other as well. So maybe they'll put in the chat and tell us what else they've done to learn about our new standards. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that as part of your introduction. Now we get to the rest of the introduction though. I like to do waterfall in the chat, and this requires you to answer a question but not hit enter in the chat until we say. So please type your answers to the following questions in a single message in our chat box, but do not click send until I say that phrase that's on the screen. We'd like for you to put your name first and last, the language or languages you teach and or supervise, and then what organization you're from. So please hold, just type that in the chat, but don't enter it yet until we say. We'll pause for a moment to give you time to get that ready. Please wait. Please do not hit enter on the chat. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. Let's watch the waterfall. All right, take a look. We've got a good sampling of folks from across the state, all different languages, different levels. I'm seeing different districts as well as some charter schools. Some people including the name of their school, whether that's an elementary school, a middle school, or a high school. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing today. It's good to see everybody here today, learning together. All right, great. Thank you so much. You can continue to put those in as we go, and I would always encourage everyone to take a look at the chat and what's being shared. as well as what's being asked. All right, great. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone. Today, like I said, we're going to talk about our instructional support resources. And specifically, I want to make sure you know what's available now in our World Languages Resources Hub. Many of these were featured during the regional trainings or have been mentioned in the newsletters or at other sessions, for example, at conferences when we do DPI updates on the standards. So hopefully you'll be familiar with some of them, but if not, you certainly will be by the end of this broadcast. Everything that we're about to show you is in fact posted in the World Languages Resources Hub. In the Hub, under our World Language Standards Instructional Toolkit Resources space that you see there pictured on the right-hand side of the slide, are these tools. The crosswalk that shows how our old standards compare to our new standards. The quick overview, which is basically like a frequently asked questions document about our new standards. The proficiency outcomes document. I know that's one that many of you have been taking a look at, and in fact was the focus of one of our previous broadcasts when it was in draft form, but now it's finalized. We also have a glossary of all of our terms. We have unpacking documents for our 3 different levels of proficiency: novice, intermediate, and advanced. And we have the LIS defined for world languages document with instructional examples and a glossary with the LIS, or literacy instruction standards. So that's what's available, and that's what we're going to talk about today, as well as do some activities with. Let's get started with the crosswalk. The crosswalk actually has been out since July of 2024. It was one of the documents we actually presented to the State Board of Education when we asked that they approve our new standards, which they did on July 11th, 2024. You can see here there's a shortened URL as well as a QR code to access this document. You're going to see that that's available for all of the documents we're sharing today. On the screen, you see a snapshot of what that document looks like, some basic information, and it clearly shows that there's a place for our 2010 information, our 2010 standards with the strands, the standards, and the clarifying objectives, as well as our 2024 standard course of study for world languages. And again, you see it goes through the strands, the standards, and the objectives. And then on the right, there's a notes section that talks about how things have changed and why that is, as well as some references to some materials that were used when the Data Review Committee, or DRC, and the Standards Writing Team, or SWT, responded to the feedback you gave about our standards. One of the things I get asked is, what is the tool I can use for updating, let's say, a local curriculum where I've got all the objectives and so forth already written out for the old standards. And this might be that document. If you're wanting a place to find the old standards and strands and objectives and see where all of them went into the new standards that we have, this is where you would go with the crosswalk to find that information. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat the link you see on the screen, the shortened URL for the crosswalk, in case you want it specifically there. You can go to that and you'll be able to access that, or you can use the QR code. Hang on just a second. I think our link didn't copy quite right, so I'm going to go ahead and redo that. There you go in the chat. So that's our crosswalk. It has been around for a while. Please be cautious. I'm giving you ways to access this electronically. Know that this document is one of our longest because, again, it does a comparison side by side of our old standards to our new standards. So it's about 40 pages if you print it out, all told. The quick overview, of course, is much shorter because it's designed to be a one-page document talking about what has changed with our standards. And that's things like, when things were updated and so forth, but also references to things like how things been improved and how the proficiency outcomes changed. How inclusive are the standards, or what happened to our culture standard that was in the old standards but is now incorporated in a new way with our new standard course of study. So that's also there on the screen. That quick overview, like I said, is kind of like a frequently asked questions kind of document. That's a real easy way if you're wanting to answer questions to someone, maybe with your PLCs, professional learning communities, or administrators, or even parents or students about what's changed in the new standards. The quick overview is a nice place for you to go to get that information. And again, I put that link in the chat so that you have it, as well as having it on the screen and accessing the QR code if you would like. Up next is our proficiency outcomes document. And this is something that used to be part of our actual standards document in the old standards, but is now a support tool in the new standards. That's important for us because the proficiency outcomes document shows us what students should know and be able to do by the end of a particular course or program with their proficiency. And this was something that we had for the first time in the old standards, because in the 2010 standard course of study for world languages, that was the first time we'd ever had proficiency-based standards. In fact, it was the first time any state had ever had proficiency-based K-12 world language standards. But we've learned a lot more now. And because, as I mentioned, those were the 2010 standards, and now we have the 2024 standards, we opted to put our proficiency outcomes document into its own space as a support tool rather than into the standards document, so that we could update information if we needed to as we move through the years with implementing our new standards. You see there on page 1 of that proficiency outcomes document is the proficiency summaries. This is, as it looks, a 3-page or 3-bullet list of what it is that students should know and be able to do at each level or sub-level of proficiency. So we have novice low through advanced high in our new standards. So basically that's 3 proficiency levels, novice, intermediate, and advanced, as well as their sub-levels, low, mid, and high at each one. Notice that there's some color coding with that inverted pyramid from ACTFL that describes the proficiency levels. And that color coding is used throughout our proficiency outcomes document, as well as other support tools for our new standards when we talk about proficiency. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to our proficiency outcomes document in the chat as well. You can see it there on the side of the screen, as well as the QR code if you'd like to access it like that. So the proficiency summaries are on page 1, but the program descriptions, as well as the proficiency outcome charts for each course and program, are on the pages that follow. Our proficiency outcomes document is 12 pages long, as you can see, and there's a space dedicated to classical language programs, dual and heritage language programs, and modern language programs. Let's take a little bit closer look at how that organization works for us. Again, the proficiency outcomes document has the K-12 classical languages section, and there's information for classical languages like Latin, ancient Greek, and Sanskrit, both for K-8 programs as well as levels 1 through 6 for either high school courses or high school credit courses for middle school students. There's also a K-12 dual and heritage languages section in our proficiency outcomes document. It's divided into dual language immersion, or DLI, specifically for DLI programs by grade span, so K2, 3-5, 6-8, and 9-12. And then there's a whole section for heritage language level courses 1 and 2. Again, level 1 and 2 means those are either high school courses or high school credit courses for middle school students. Heritage language programs are some of our fastest growing in the state. They used to be called things like native speakers courses or Spanish for native speakers, but of course we do them in many languages, and they extend beyond just students who have, let's say, a language as their native or home or first language. It might also be students who are military connected and who have lived abroad and studied, and so another language besides English has become part of their heritage. It could also be students in dual language immersion or DLI programs who develop enough skills to need to study a language as a heritage language, because in a heritage language course, we're looking at literacy skills. And so our heritage language courses end up being language arts courses to a large degree. Again, for students who come to us with a lot of proficiency already in that language from some kind of experience that they've had, usually in their K-5 or K-8 school years. And finally, we have our K-12 modern languages. And those are languages that are being studied because there's someone's first language somewhere in the world, and students are acquiring that language. So this is language study for the first time, either at the K-8 level or levels 1 through 8 for high school courses or high school credit courses at the middle school. You may recall from our previous broadcast, as well as work in your own review on these documents, that now our modern languages and our heritage languages as well are broken into categories. So instead of saying alphabetic, logographic, and visual languages like we did in the old standards, now we talk about categories of languages, and those categories then work together to determine things like proficiency outcomes. So category 1 and 2 languages are languages like French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish, and so on. These are languages that use the same alphabet, if you will, as English does, and so they are grouped together for looking at proficiency outcomes. Category 3 and 4 languages are the ones you see on the screen: ASL, or American Sign Language, Arabic, Cherokee, Chinese, Greek, Hebrew, Hindi, Japanese, Korean, Russian, Turkish, Urdu, and so on, that are studied in North Carolina, but obviously use either a different alphabet, like Russian uses the Cyrillic alphabet, or a different writing system altogether, like Chinese does, for example. And sometimes ASL, with that visual language, is categorized in 3 and 4, or has its own proficiency outcome charts, depending on how things went with the standards writing team based on your feedback about our old standards and what we needed to improve. So that's how things are organized within the proficiency outcomes document. And remember, in addition to the proficiency outcome charts, there's a program description and some other details about our programs that would be very helpful to you as a teacher in a number of ways. All right, so let's get to our first activity. This is activity 1A. And like any educator, I have numbered these so that you can keep track of them if you're using these slides later on in your own local presentations. But for activity 1A, I'm going to ask you to download and or access a copy of the proficiency outcomes document. Like I said, that's already in the chat, that link to that, and you see that at the bottom of this screen, as well as the QR code to use. So once you've downloaded that, I want you to find and mark the page where one of your courses or programs is located in that document. And then review the program description and the portion of the proficiency outcome charts for the students you teach. And then make a note about 2 observations you have. One piece of information that you already knew when you read that, and one piece of information that's new to you for whatever reason. So let's pause for a moment. Again, download or access a copy of the proficiency outcomes document. Find the page that has your course or program in it, and take a look at those outcomes chart as well as the others. All right, go ahead and work on that. I'm seeing a comment to please add the link in the chat box again. Happy to do that. There you go. Let's pause for a moment while you do this activity. I see a question in the chat about where can you find things in proficiency outcomes document. I actually had thought about going through this together, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the link myself on the slide so we can take a look at this document and answer the question that's in there. Remember, we said that every program has its own page or section in here. So as we scroll down, the classical language programs like Latin and so forth are there. I'm going to go ahead and keep scrolling. Hope no one gets dizzy on the scroll. Notice that starting on page 3, we have our dual and heritage language program, starting with our DLI information, followed by information about our heritage language courses levels 1 and 2. And again, for our different types of languages we have that we now use category numbers for. Modern language programs, those of you who teach a language where students are just learning it, but it's a language that's spoken somewhere in the world, has their own section 2, starting on page 8. Here's our exploratory as well as other K-8 programs. And then those who teach modern language programs, which are our most common, are here. If you teach a Spanish 1, I see Spanish 1 and 2 has come up. Spanish is a category 1 and 2 language. So here on page 10 would be your proficiency outcomes chart. Notice the proficiency outcomes charts, all of them on the left-hand side have the course or program, and then they spread out across with our standards at the top, interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational standards, and then the proficiency outcomes for each skill area based on the standard. So if you're looking at that, if you teach Spanish 1, let's say, or something like French 1 or German 1, you see that first row is just for those languages in that category, and it goes across, and it refers to those proficiency outcomes that we saw summarized on page 1. I hope that answered the question that I see in the chat. Yeah, I'm seeing some people start to put in their observations of how the outcomes sometimes are higher. Please note that that was one of the changes that we heard from you in surveys and focus groups, is that the rigor needed to be increased because our students can do more quickly. And so you see that the outcomes for different skill areas are a little elevated compared to our old standards. That's particularly true of levels 1, 2, and 3, sometimes 4, depending on that. Yeah, all right. So let's go ahead. You're making your observations. You want to go ahead and share your observations, you can. What's one piece of information that you already knew that you're seeing here in this proficiency outcomes document, or one piece of information that's new to you? All right. I see someone says that there are 8 levels for modern languages. That is true. There were actually 8 levels as well for outcomes and so forth in our old standards, and there are 6 levels for classical languages. That's based on our feedback and research and so forth for those. You know, those upper levels aren't ones that we often see taught, but because we do have students who are quite advanced, either because they're heritage language students, or they've been in a DLI program or had some other significant K-8 experience, you can go up to level 8 in our modern language programs. I see the question, how do the new NCDPI World Language Proficiency Outcomes compare to other states? Actually quite favorably and quite similar. I mentioned that in our 2010 Standard Course of Study for World Languages, we were the first state in the country to have proficiency-based outcomes for our K-12 standards. Since that time, almost every other state has followed suit. And what that meant was when we went to do our research and analysis and feedback for these standards that you see here with these new proficiency outcomes, we had a lot more information to draw on, which is incredible. What we found was that like us and like we were seeing in our own feedback, people were saying that those proficiency outcomes were good, but when we looked at the beginning levels, like levels 1, 2, 3, and like I said, sometimes 4 as well, that the expectations need to be just a little bit higher than we had in our 2010 Standard Course of Study for World Languages. And so you see that adjusted now, and that does put us more in line with what's happening across the country in other states, as well as with things like our seal of biliteracy, because as a part of this, our minimum proficiency required for our seal of biliteracy went from intermediate low to intermediate mid. All right, so I'm seeing some other observations. People are saying things like the reading skills and interpretive communication involve things like infographics and other types of text. And that's important because text and authentic text can be a wide variety of things, not just the things we think traditionally of. And those people saying too, they knew the standards, which is good, but this is new the way the standards are being presented. Absolutely. We updated all of our materials. Now, take a moment because I see some people asking you some things about their individual cases, which is always important to think about. But trust me, I have designed our activities today to focus on that as well as we continue to move forward. Oh, and I do see one question. Is the curriculum changing as well? Yes, of course. In North Carolina, as in many states, when we have a new standard course of study or set of standards, that means that the local curriculum, because curriculum is a local matter that is written locally, that will have to be updated as well. And that's something that we're all going to be doing this summer in anticipation for implementing with the new standards, because we will have to make sure that the local curriculum is standards based and based on our new standards that we'll be implementing starting in the 25-26 school year. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of these other tools, as well as some of the materials that are available to update that local curriculum. All right, and next up is the glossary. Obviously, a glossary for anything is just the information, the terms and so forth, and those terms defined for everyone. So for our world languages glossary, they are the terms and acronyms related to our world language programs, our course options, our organizations, our initiatives, and the standards and support resources that we use as part of this. Give me just a moment. Let me put the link to the glossary into the chat. You see it there on the page, of course, on the slide. And then we can go ahead and take a look at that. The glossary itself looks pretty simple to start, but I'm featuring here on the screen just a look at the A section, all the A terms and definitions we have, and you can see that there's quite a bit, and there's references to the kinds of things we would need to talk about. So again, think about what would be in here. So first, we've got an acronym, ACTFL, defined. We've also got a program or initiative advanced placement that many of our schools use in world languages. We've got information about American Sign Language and how it's defined. We've got the verb analyze because that's used in our standards and objectives. And then we've got those authentic texts where we talk about what makes an authentic text and how that can go beyond just basic text and include things like infographics and all. But we've also got the types of text we talk about in our standards and objectives. So informational text, fictional text, historical text, and modern text. All right. That's the glossary. I encourage you to go through that because the definitions that you see, we're just looking at the A section here, but the definitions go through page 18 in the glossary. And then there's a whole references section through page 23. So again, a lengthy document if you actually print it out, but lots of information to explore. We also have unpacking documents. We actually have 3 of them. We have an unpacking document per proficiency level with its 3 sublevels. So there's a novice one with novice, low, mid, and high. There's an intermediate one with intermediate, low, mid, and high. And there's an advanced one with low, mid, and high. And what they have, you can see in that screenshot there on the slide, is an example of what you would see for novice high. And so the unpacking document has the standard and objectives out of each section. In this case, we're looking at the interdisciplinary and literacy connections information for standard number 1 out of novice high. So you see that you've got those listed with the standard itself, as well as the objectives and its dot notation or label for each objective. Then you've got the glossary terms. So instead of having to have the glossary open all the time for an unpacking document, we've actually pulled the terms that are used in those particular standards or objectives you're looking at in that section and just transfer them over automatically into the unpacking document. Then what follows that is a section on clarifications where you've got the objectives. There are 2 of them in this case, restated in a way that kind of explains what you might do with them. And what follows that is an in the classroom idea that goes with that particular objective. And this is just an idea. These little scenarios you see are meant to be examples of what you might be able to do with that objective in the classroom. They are taken from classroom teachers, getting feedback from everybody, and they're designed to be target language neutral. And so these are just ideas to get you started, particularly if you are going to write a local curriculum. I see that Mara and some others have commented about that curriculum question, because when we talk about a new curriculum for state standards, obviously that's not something provided by the state. The curriculum is usually determined by the district and written locally, sometimes by the district, sometimes by departments in the district or teachers or whatnot. So what I want you to do is to take a look at this, because the unpacking documents has a lot of information then that you might want to use as you are writing your local curriculum for our new standards. One thing to keep in mind is that the in the classroom ideas are not required. They are not designed to be assessment examples and things that you have to do. They're just out there for you to get a sample of what this might look like as you think about your own understanding and the activities and so forth you already have in your local curriculum, maybe even in your lesson plans, because they are sometimes that detailed that they'd be appropriate for a lesson plan. Now we have, as I said, 3 unpacking documents, and you can see here all the links for them for novice, intermediate, and advanced, as well as their QR codes. I will, as has been requested, put those in the chat. Give me just a moment as I load those in, but you see those on the screen as well. Novice 1 is in the chat for you to take a look at. The intermediate one is also now there. And finally, the advanced one. We do have 3 different ones. I encourage you to explore these, and obviously you're going to probably be looking at first the ones that have the proficiency outcomes for the courses you teach, which is why we started with our proficiency outcomes document, so you can take a look at that. I'll pause for a moment in case you're still getting those from the chat or taking a look at the slides and getting those as well. There's also one more tool we want to talk about before we head back to the second part of our activity, and that's the LIS Define for World Languages document. The LIS Define for World Languages actually looks at teacher standards. Oops, excuse me. Give me just a moment. We're having there. There are 8 literacy instruction standards, or LIS, and those are for teachers. And so what we have done for our new world language standards is to simply take those 8 LIS standards for teachers and pair them with instructional examples that use objectives at the novice and intermediate levels from our standard course of study for world languages. The LIS Defined for World Languages also includes the glossary of literacy terms with notes specific to world language instruction if needed. So I'll just put a little screenshot up of that. Notice that in our LIS Defined for World Languages document, on the left side, you have the literacy instruction standard itself, so you can see that. And I know many of you are already familiar with these materials that were released by our English Language Arts team. But you have that LIS, and then you have any notes that are appropriate to world languages instruction. In the middle, you have an instructional example, again, paired with objectives from either the novice or intermediate level. And these are much like the in the classroom ideas items from the unpacking documents. It's just an example of how you might, as a teacher in this case, be teaching these objectives in a world language classroom. And then finally on the right, a glossary of terms. And again, this is for the LIS specifically, as well as any additional terms like authentic text that you see on the screen that are unique to the World Language Standards. Give me just a moment. I'm putting the link in the chat right now for our LIS defined for world languages. You see it on the screen, of course. It is our shortened URL, go.ncdpi.gov/LIS define WL. And of course, there is a QR code for it too. All right, so that gets us to our next part of this activity, activity 1B. So before you downloaded a copy of the proficiency outcomes document and accessed it and kind of took a look at it. Now I'd like you to download or access a copy of one of the following documents, either the unpacking document for novice levels, or the unpacking document for intermediate levels, or the LIS defined for world language document. And you see that those links are on the screen, and with their QR codes if you need them. And I want you to pick one of those. You don't have to do all three right now. You can come back later and work with the others. Just pick one. I see someone's asking, what does LIS stands for? Literacy Instruction Standards. These are a set of materials that were released by our English Language Arts team a couple of years ago, and so they've been building materials for them. And when they asked if we would like an LIS defined for world languages document with these instructional examples, we jumped at it. We said that would be a great idea to have because the LIS is obviously focused on literacy. They are the literacy instruction standards, and we do literacy all the time in world languages. All right, so now that you've got one of those documents, either the unpacking for novice, the unpacking for intermediate, or the LIS defined for world languages, I'm going to ask you to take a look at the objectives on the next slide to focus on for the last part of this activity. So there's going to be 10 objectives from our standard course of study. I will not say that they were drawn randomly. They were not drawn randomly. They were drawn very specifically because I want you to pick one of them. Just choose one of the objectives on the next slide to focus on for our last part of this activity. And I want you to base it on the proficiency outcomes chart for the students you teach. So you saw that in the proficiency outcomes document. You saw what you had for interpretive standards, that's standard number 1, interpersonal standards number 2, or presentational standards number 3. And so what I want you to do is choose one of the objectives you see on this next screen to pursue in this activity. And there are 10 for you to choose from. Just pick one. That's all you need to do. Also, don't forget when you see our standards and objectives, of course, they have that dot notation or label on the objectives, starting with the proficiency level. So like NL for novice low, or NH for novice high. And then they have the strand abbreviation, either ILC or ICC. And then they have the standard 1, 2, or 3. And then they have the objective number. So there you see laid out in the charts, in a chart very, very similar to what we have in the proficiency outcomes document. All right, I'm going to take another few seconds here. Remember, you're just choosing one of these objectives for this activity. I see someone saying, do we pick either interpretive or interpersonal? Yes, pick one. You're only picking one objective. There are 10 on this screen. So it can be one from interpretive, it could be one from interpersonal, or it could be one from presentational. Your decision. I did do the color coding, of course, to match what's in the proficiency outcomes document. All right. So now what I want you to do, now that you got your objective picked and you've got your materials, for activity 1C, I want you to, with that objective, take a deep dive into the appropriate unpacking document. So the novice one, if you picked a novice objective, the intermediate, if you picked an intermediate objective, or the LIS defined for world languages, if you're working with that one, and answer these questions about that objective and what you find in that document that helps explain that objective more, that has the in the classroom idea or the instructional example, that has the clarifications, that has the glossary, all of that. So with that objective, what additional information is available about this objective that is helpful to you specifically? And how could you use and or adapt the in the classroom idea or the instructional example, depending on which document you're working with, for your classroom? And then be ready to share out in the waterfall in the chat soon. So let's pause for a moment. We're going to pause here for about 5 minutes, I think, as we work through this. I'm always being cautious of our time, don't worry. But again, with that objective you chose, take a deep dive into the document you're working with. Find out what additional information is available about this objective that's helpful to you. And then how could you use and or adapt the in the classroom idea or the instructional example for your students or for the training you do even? Just answer those questions for yourself for now. And I'm going to pause us for about 5 minutes so that you can work on this. We have about 1 minute left to go, but I thought I'd show you the waterfall in the chat so you can start working on that if you're ready. Remember, with waterfall in the chat, please don't hit enter and share your answer until we say, let's watch the waterfall. So be cautious about that. With this, I want us to think about using these objectives in the classroom. So I want us to answer in a single message in the chat box, like I said, starting with the letter of response for the first question. So number one is, what was your reaction to your objectives in the classroom idea or instructional example? And you start by just typing the letter for your response. So either A, I already do this activity. B, I already do something similar to this. C, this is a new idea that I'd like to try. D, I got distracted and found a different objectives idea or example to use or adapt. Or E, other. So you're going to start your response with the letter of your response for number one, and then tell us why you gave that response. Tell us a little about your thinking. So remember, just type your answer, your message in the chat box, but do not hit enter yet. Save that for later. All right. Be finishing up your response, starting with the letter of your response for the first question, and then the why, and telling us a little bit about your thinking, but don't hit yet. Don't enter yet. Please wait. All right, let's watch the waterfall. Take a look at people's responses. I see a lot of A's, B's, and C's. So some who already do this activity, some who do something similar to it already, or some who said this is a new idea. Take a look at what people are sharing about what they do in their classroom. Some people are saying that they like these in the classroom ideas or the instructional examples because they want to do more of a particular skill in their classroom. And so this is an idea generator for them. Okay. See some who like to adapt an idea that is inspiring them. All right, lots of good ideas here for your local curriculum that are proficiency based. Right. One thing to remember about our proficiency outcomes documents and proficiency in general, when we think about the proficiency outcomes document, is that proficiency and performance are two different things. Proficiency refers to what a student knows and can do with the language when they leave the learning environment where you as a teacher have provided them all the supports for their learning. Performance is the practice they do in the classroom to make sure that they're building that proficiency and will have that proficiency when they leave your classroom and move on in their language learning. So keep that in mind as we're talking about proficiency and performance. All right, well, thank you for sharing. You can continue to share if you would like. These are lots of great ideas, and we'll collect them up and post them with some of the materials for this broadcast. All right, let's talk a little bit about not only the resources that are available to you now, but what's coming this summer in 2025. First and foremost, I wanted to share with you that everything will be posted in our World Languages Resources Hub. You already saw that these materials that we've been working with today are there, but I wanted to share with you that coming soon in the Teacher and Classroom Resources section you see indicated on the screen are our new navigators. These used to be the COCOs, the Clarifying Objectives by Course Outcomes documents, so they were called COCOs or CO2s by some folks. They're now called navigators. They'll have a brief course description, They'll also have the objectives written out based on those proficiency outcomes for students so that these materials can be used in local curriculum writing. That's kind of the purpose of the COCOs or navigators, is to support your local curriculum writing. So the objectives based on those proficiency outcomes will be part of this written out. And then also there'll be some course codes included for each language where that course or program is taught. So you have that information and can schedule students appropriately. There'll be some additional information too about our standards and objectives and strands and how they work together. But the COCOs or navigators documents are designed primarily for teachers as they're writing a local curriculum based on the new state standards. One thing you might be trying to calculate in your head, and so I will just do the math for you, is how many navigators will there be? There's one navigator for every course that's taught, or every program that's taught. And we group them, obviously, by things like Category 1 and 2 languages or Category 3 and 4 languages. So there are over 50 navigators total that you might be using. However, in any one situation, of course, you'll only use the navigators that are relevant to what you're teaching. So let's say you teach Spanish 1 and 2. You would only need 2 navigators. There'll be one for Spanish 1 and one for Spanish 2. It'll obviously be the navigators for Category 1 and 2 languages for modern languages, because that's what Spanish 1 and 2 are. But that's an example of the materials that'll be to get available. I'd hope to have these a little bit earlier and be able to release them today, but I hope that the activity we did in looking at the resources and our objectives is a good start to what you will get when you have the navigators. Also, under Administrator and Program Resources, we have 2 new materials coming this summer. The first will be the Administrator Guides. There are currently 3 of those, and there'll be 4 with the new standards. So there'll be one for classical languages, one for modern languages, and now one each for DLI programs and heritage languages. Currently, we have one just for dual and heritage programs, so we will have 4 now, with that one broken into 2 different ones. We'll also have the crosswalks, which shows us things like when we do the Credit by Demonstrated Mastery process, or CDM, how does that correlate to a particular course and its proficiency outcome? We also have crosswalks for things like high school courses as compared to community college courses, if a student is taking their language sequence at 2 different campuses. And we have crosswalks for a number of other things as well. And so those will all be updated and available this summer. One new resource that we've never had before is that we are going to have a parent or caregiver guide. And that's brand new for everybody, for every set of standards, whether it's world languages or science or arts education, right? But we are going to talk about, in our parent and caregiver guide, the benefits of language education in the first section, and then have a section on learning world languages at school, where we'll include our updated bridging documents. And then we'll have a section on helping a child succeed in world language courses and programs, because we often get questions from parents about, what can I do to help my child be successful in a world language classroom if they're taking a language that I don't use. And so we're going to have some tips for them. Well, I see the question is there going to be a navigator for elementary Spanish? The answer is definitely yes. One of the things that you see in the proficiency outcomes document, obviously, is elementary Spanish, and elementary courses, or K-8 courses, are broken into beginning, continuing, and extended courses. And so there will be navigators for each of those. And again, for the different categories of languages. So Category 1 and 2 languages will have their own navigators, and Category 3 and 4 languages will have a different navigator because they have different proficiency outcomes and a different chart. I see someone's excited about the parent and caregiver guide. We are as well. One thing I can also add about the parent and caregiver guide is that, like the standards now in installations, they will be translated into Spanish. And so our standards are available in English and Spanish, and the parent and caregiver guides will ultimately be available in English and Spanish. I'm sure some of you already have the question of will they be available in other languages? The answer is we don't know. We have asked for materials available in other languages, certainly for world languages, but maybe even in other areas. But right now, part of our process of being an installation, which is what we're doing this year with our new standards, where we're still using our old standards, but we're getting ready to use the new standards. During installation, the new standards are always translated into Spanish now and made available. And again, like I said, once the parent and caregiver guides are out, those will also be translated into Spanish. And We'll see, perhaps other languages as well. All right, that brings us to our upcoming PD, or professional development for world languages. I'm about to share with you some professional development not only for this summer, but into the next school year. And this is the first time I've been able to share this, so some of this will be tentative, and I'll let you know which dates and things are tentative and which are firm as of right now. But I want to make sure that you get ready to save these dates. The NCDPI Summer Conference is coming up. This is 2 conferences wrapped into one. So the conference called the Standards Academy, which we started last year and now will be an annual event, as well as the Growing Success for Multilingual Learners, or ML's Summer Conference. Those are combined into one conference. And so you see on the screen that the West version of the NCDPI Summer Conference will be on June 24th through the 26th. That will be in Buncombe County. And the East version of this conference will be July 22nd to the 24th, and that will be in Chatham County. Also, the Growing Success for ML's Summer Conference will have a virtual component to it on July 25th. And so the sessions from that may be available as well virtually. These dates are set. And I wanted to share with you the summer conference brochure. I'll go ahead and copy that and put that in the chat so you can go directly to it. It is an online Canva document, but details about the sessions and certainly registration are being added as they are known. Registration is already set up and ready to go. This conference is free, by the way. The NCDPI Summer Conference is free registration. You just have to sign up for it. The only thing you'd be responsible for is travel, depending on which one you choose and how far that is away from you. You see at the top of the screen the world language sessions that will definitely be at the NCDPI Summer Conference. The first one, the Implementing the World Language Standards in K-12 Classrooms, is a 3-hour session that we will be offering as part of the Standards Academy. Also, we'll be doing a session called Offering Honors Level 1 and 2 World Language Courses. That will be part of the Standards Academy as well, and that'll be a 90-minute session. In addition, we'll have Empowering MLs, or Multilingual Learners, in Honors World Language Courses. That will be a 90-minute session that's on the Growing Success for ML's Summer Conference side of the conference. And then, of course, we do have a lunchtime opportunity, just an hour long, called Chat and Chew, about dual language immersion, or DLI, in North Carolina. And that'll be resources, reflections, and real talk at the summer conference. So those are the 4 sessions that I know for sure are being scheduled for world languages. We actually have put in a couple of more, and I'm waiting to see if they get scheduled maybe in the East offering of the conference. But I know right now, and you may find in that brochure if you've already gone to it, that those 4 sessions are available on the West on June 24th to 26th. So I hope to see you there. I'll be presenting at all of those, and I may have some co-presenters as well. Oh, I see a question. Will these be offered in August as well as online? No, we have something different planned for August and online. So the NCDPI Summer Conference is June 24th to 26th in the West, and July 22nd to the 24th in the East. And then, like I said, the Growing Success for ML's Summer Conference side of this conference will be doing a virtual component on July 25th. But I'm glad you're asking about August, because that's what's up next. In August, we are starting out on Wednesday, August 13th, with a tour of the updated World Languages Resources Hub. I had indicated the places in the hub where all of our materials would be going, including those resources we're still waiting to be published. And actually, part of that process is getting them drafted, approved by leadership, and published on the World Languages Resources Hub. I'll be doing that throughout the summer, but on Wednesday, August 13th, I'm going to be giving a virtual tour of our new updated World Languages Resources Hub. I'm going to give 2 tours. One will be from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in the morning, and the other one will be 1:30 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. This will be the same tour for both broadcast times. You can choose morning or afternoon. A recording will be posted for later access, and you can earn a certificate of participation if you do in fact attend the live broadcast, but I will not have an asynchronous option available afterwards. So that's the first thing that's going to be offered starting in officially our new school year on Wednesday, August 13th. Also, I'm glad to share with you that our World Languages Standards Implementation webinar series is being planned. For 25-26, that will be on Wednesdays at 3:45 to 5:15 p.m. on the dates you see on the screen. So September 10th, November 12th, February 11th, and April 15th. And so this will be like the webinar series we're finishing today, the implementation series that we'll have available since we'll be implementing our new state standards in the 25-26 school year. So this will be Wednesdays. We actually lengthened these broadcasts to an hour and a half at the request and feedback that you've given already in this webinar series, as well as regional trainings and some other things we've done. So please make a note. These are all Wednesdays on the screen, and the broadcast times are the same, 3:45 to 5:15. The archives of the webinar series are always posted. That includes the recording, the slides, and any handouts and links we have. They'll be posted for later access in local professional development or PD use. And so you can see them there. I see some people all starting to offer when their semester starts. If you're not able to join us on these dates and times for the webinar series, there will be an asynchronous option available afterwards. And so unlike the tour, which I will post a recording of so you can get to if you're not able to join us live on August 13th, but for the webinar series, when I post that, I will also post an asynchronous option so you can make up the credit, if you will. We had to kind of divvy up how we were going to do that this year. So again, the webinar series, just like this webinar series, will have an asynchronous option available afterwards, but the tour will just be recorded and posted for those who just want to access the information. I see some questions in the chat. Which trainings are required? No trainings are required. NCDPI wants to offer trainings based on our new standards. I can tell you that our standards implementation series will probably be looking at proficiency. And we're working on maybe even having a way to earn a badge in addition to certificates of participation for going to the webinar series, either the live broadcast or doing the asynchronous option. But no training is required unless you've got a local requirement for some kind of local training that's being done. And I see the question, are teachers free to examine the resources I own without credit? Absolutely. As it says on the screen, I post the archives, including the recording, the slides, all the handouts and links we used, and you can certainly access that on your own whenever you want to, when you need it. All right. Somebody said they'd like to see a repeat of the tour. I'll go back a slide. Give me just a moment. Here you go. Somebody's asking about the tour date. The tour of the updated World Languages Resources Hub, we'll explore that together, is Wednesday, August 13th. And so there's a morning session and an afternoon session. You can pick the time that works for you. It is the same content for both broadcasts. So please take a look at that. You don't have to attend both. You can just pick one. And as I said, I'll record the tour and I'll post it so you can access it later, but I can't offer an asynchronous option for that, like I do with the webinar series. I see Dora's question are about the certificates counted for CEUs. They can be. The certificate you get is for a contact hour or how much time we spend together. 10 contact hours equals 1 CEU. But in North Carolina, because we're a local control state, your district or charter school often has to give approval as to whether or not those certificates, those contact hours can be calculated for your CEUs. I see a question about what is the content for the tours. The tour is entirely looking at the World Languages Resources Hub, all the updated resources, what's there, where it's located, how you can access it, all of that. So it literally is just touring the hub that we have online. I'll click on that real quick so you can see it live. This is our hub as it stands now. And as you can see, there's 4 different categories: the World Language Standards Instructional Toolkit resources, the teacher and classroom resources, the administrator and program resources, and professional learning. And as you can see, underneath each of those main areas are different types of resources available. That's obviously going to be updated because we have updated resources and new materials. You see some of the updates already. They're on the left under Instructional Toolkit resources with like the national standards and proficiency outcomes materials. But we will be updating things like the administrator guides that you see, and the bridging documents, and the COCOs, like I said, will be becoming navigators. So we will be touring all of that on August 13th together, so you can see all the updated materials. You can ask where things have been placed if you can't find them, and that kind of thing. All right, I see your request to add a link to the hub. I'll be happy to do that. Give me just a second so I can grab that. There's the link in the chat to the hub, and you see that they're on the screen as well. I actually don't have the QR code. I will fix that in the future because I'm sure I can get a QR code for our hub to make it accessible to everyone. All right, so that's the tour on August 13th. And then, like I said, here's the webinar series we're planning. It will likely be called something like the power of proficiency, because we'll be examining proficiency in our standards and how that looks, let's say in each standard, and maybe strands and objectives. You see the dates, those are all Wednesdays, and 3:45 to 5:15. As I say, we do post all those archives. You can access them however you would like. And there will be an asynchronous option to get credit available after the live broadcast if you want to do it in a self-paced way, or you can't come to the live broadcast. So that'll be available to you. All right, we are to wrap up, and I see a question in the chat that we're about to answer, so give me just a moment for that. But let's wrap up today. We are right on time for wrap up. Just a quick reminder, this is our timeline for World Languages installation. Notice that our little car here on our roadmap graphic, our World Languages car, is in installation. We're spending the whole year working together, preparing for implementation. And so as it shows there, in initial implementation, in 25-26, that's when new standards will be used in all K-12 classrooms. You've seen our installation timeline and that kind of thing. Obviously, we're getting ready to finish that up. Honestly, this is the last broadcast that's part of that, because once we start the summer conference, that'll be part of the new initial implementation year for 25-26. This is our hub again. This is just a quick reminder to go ahead and bookmark that if you would like. If you have Canvas and a dashboard, you can actually click join this course, and that will allow the World Languages Resources Hub to be placed on your dashboard so you can have it easy access for that. I see some people are joining right now. Great, I'm glad you're doing that. But yeah, you just click on this join this course link, and then you've got it. And by the way, once we update the hub and as we're doing it, you will be able to see those updates live. So the actual shortened URL and that kind of thing will not change. If it's on your dashboard already, you will start to see the changes as we add them. This is our flyer for this year's webinar series, obviously. We are at the last one at Onward to Initial Implementation. And as some people are asking, I will be releasing the asynchronous option for this broadcast in our World Languages Resources Hub under Professional Learning and Standards Installation very soon. That will include the slides from today, the recording we've made, and the links and things like that that we have. So to answer some of your questions, would you mind sharing the PowerPoint with us today? I would not mind at all. In fact, I always plan to do that. I always put that into the hub so that you can see it, and you can pull those slides as you need to. I encourage you to make copies of them, honestly, if you're doing local presentations, and then that way you can sort and sift the slides the way you need to for your own local presentations and not have to make new slides when there are already slides available. So that's our series. Notice, by the way, that there are still asynchronous options available for the overview of the new standards broadcast and the updated proficiency outcome charts broadcast. Those asynchronous options will be available until the end of the school year, which is technically June 30th of any year. And so those are out there. But then, like I said, the asynchronous option for today will also be available if you have colleagues who weren't able to join you. And that's it. Final thing is, what questions do you have about the new standards, its support resources, the installation phase in 24-25, etc.? I'm here. I'm not running off. If you've got questions, we can talk about them. I will submit your requests for certificates of attendance for today's broadcast, and you should receive them as an email attachment before the end of the school year. I know some of you are also waiting on certificates for the regional trainings. Ask for your patience as we are wrapping up. There's a lot of areas, including world languages, that are asking for certificates to be processed and sent. So we will get everything to you, don't worry. And then finally, please submit the evaluation form. Please give me some feedback, particularly as we start to plan the webinar series for 25-26, so that I know what you need and what you'd like to see, and also how you thought today went. I will put that link in the chat, but you obviously see it online on the slide as well, with a QR code. All right, I thank you for joining us. At the end, the only thing I have left to share with you again is my contact information if you want it. And also, if you ever have any questions and you want to have just a one-on-one meeting, I invite you to use the Connect with World Languages link. Take a look at our calendars, or your calendar as well as mine, and schedule something if you would like to chat with me about anything related to the standards or our policies in North Carolina. All right, I see the notes. Somebody said, can you share the link for the Canvas course? Absolutely. And by the way, our World Languages Resources Hub is called the Canvas course. It's not technically a Canvas course. It's just a hub for it to place everything. But yes, you can sort of join the course if you will and place it on your dashboard if you want. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today and gotten some information that you can use right away in your classrooms. I thank you for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and click the recording off.